Good evening and welcome to Responding to COVID-19, Fueling the Economy on TTT, Talk City 91.1 FM and TTT Live online on Facebook. I am Wesley Gibbings. The current period is being described by many commentators as a perfect global economic storm. The onset of the pandemic came even as international energy markets were confronting declining demand, prices, and in some instances, reductions in production. There's every likelihood, according to the experts, that depressed conditions will prevail in the foreseeable future as reduced economic activity accompanies measures to address the spread of the virus. This evening, we are taking a close-up look at our own energy sector through the eyes of three top industry executives. From the National Gas Company, we have Mr. Himalaya, Boodoosingh, Senior Manager, HSSE and Security. From Atlantic Energy, CEO Dr. Phillip Shellbillah. And we'll be joined a little later by the Regional President of BP, Ms. Claire Fitzpatrick. Together, we will discuss how these leading companies have been able to maintain high levels of productivity while confronting the vagaries of the current national, regional, and global environment. So let's go now to Mr. Shellbillah. Dr. Shellbillah, how are you, sir?
I am very well, Wesley. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Now, tell me, this is not my area and it's not an area for the average citizen, but where in the classical business continuity planning model is there anything like this?
Well, the thing is that most businesses develop a business continuity plan and they try and anticipate various scenarios concerning, various different things that could happen. I am not sure that anybody has ever seen a pandemic like this one. As you have heard, it's been publicly stated that this is a once-in-a-100-year event. And so it is quite unique in numerous ways because this is not just a health issue. It's actually a global socio-economic threat and one that's going to have lasting consequences even after the COVID-19 virus has left us, unfortunately. So there isn't a playbook for this. We're pretty much learning as we go.
Now, given the global situation, Atlantic is very much subject to the vagaries of those developments on the global horizon. What are you seeing emerging before you at Atlantic?
So, like you say, this is global. And I think earlier you mentioned the perfect storm. This truly is a perfect storm because not only are we dealing with the virus pandemic, we have particularly affecting our industry also the low oil and gas prices, which are probably their lowest in about 20 years. When you combine that with the virus pandemic causing a crash in the market, it therefore puts the oil and gas industry in a really bad spot where you're hit by low prices, your market has crashed, and your people are threatened by this pandemic. So it's pretty much for many industries, including the oil and gas industry, a matter of survival. And so where we are today is looking at how do we survive through this phase and then prepare ourselves to thrive even beyond the pandemic.
Now, what are the measures that have kicked in at the level of Atlantic to cope with this situation that you've described?
So we've done quite a lot of things. Long before the pandemic came, we actually had in our business continuity plan, we had drawn up what we refer to as a pandemic response plan. And when this came, we basically brushed it up. But before I get into that, when this happened, we sat back and decided to set for ourselves key objectives that were going to govern how we respond to this. And effectively, we developed three key objectives for ourselves. The first is that we will protect the health and well-being of our employees. The second is that we will ensure safe and reliable operations for as long as possible. And the third is that we will care and support our stakeholders, and this includes our service providers, it includes our communities, it includes, the country as a whole. And so these three objectives have governed all that we've done since then. We started out by setting up a task force that we call the Covid-19 task force, which is a multidisciplinary team that meets every single day. It also includes our company doctor on that team. And they work very closely with our business continuity planning team. And together, where we started was to start by drawing up scenarios. How could this play out? We thought about the current situation. We looked at what is the most likely scenario in which this will play out over time. And we also worked out what we thought might be the worst case scenario. Of course, nobody has a crystal ball, and therefore this is all about, trying to look into the future without sometimes all the information that you need. But based on those scenarios, we then worked out 4 escalation levels that we thought things might play out, going all the way to the worst case scenario. And for each of those escalation levels, we developed a plan. In other words, at level 1, this is what we do. At level 2, this is what we do. Level 3, and if we get to level 4, this is also what we do.
So, but where would you be? Where are you along that spectrum?
At the moment, we consider ourselves at level 2, but we are already seeing elements of level 3 emerging, though we haven't fully moved into that level 3 stage yet.
And would level 3 relate to situations in the market or those macro issues, or are there micro issues of functionality that you're dealing with as well?
It's all of the above. So it has to do with what's going on in society itself. To what extent has the pandemic impacted the society? For example, what is the extent of community spread of the virus? How is it impacting our employees? How is it impacting our service providers? Do we still have the full complement of manpower that we need? Are we able to continue with our business as we've always done? What degree of disruption are we having in our supply chain? Can our people move around freely? So there are multiple things that we factor into determining the different levels.
Now,
but once we have...
I'm sorry, you continue, please.
I was just saying, once the individual triggers come in, then we kick in the specific plans that we have, some of which are already existing, as I said, for level 2.
Has there been an impact on output at all?
So far, there hasn't, thankfully, but we are preparing ourselves for the potential because, as you know, when you say impact, there are a number of things that could happen that are outside of our control. If anything happens to our gas supply, that could impact us. If anything happens to our supply chain or our service providers or the shipping industry globally or the market, all of these things could impact us. But like I said, so far it hasn't, and we're thankful for that.
And the stakeholders that you spoke about, that now that you're coordinating closer collaboration with, what kind of fallouts are they experiencing?
Sorry, if I understand, your question was...
regarding the stakeholders and the support service companies and other stakeholders, what kind of fallout are you seeing them experiencing at this time?
Right. I think the biggest impact that we're seeing so far has been on the market for LNG globally. We've also seen some impact on LNG shipping. And while we have managed so far to find, substitutes and alternates and to still run our business, that's where we're seeing some impact. Once there is community spread, then we expect that it could begin to impact manpower, not only ours, but also those of our service providers. Now, we hope we never get to that, but those are the sorts of potentials that are there. One thing I must say is that the arrangement and the very proactive plan that the Trinidad and Tobago government has put in place has been of immense help. It has made life a lot easier for us. Just the fact that society itself is being mandated and many people are voluntarily actually doing the things that they should do. whether it is quarantine where it should be, or people who are, social distancing, and so on and so forth. All of these things that are happening outside also help us as a business. So, thanks a lot indeed to the measures that the government has put in place so far.
Okay, we are joined at this time by Mr. Boodoosingh. He's joining us on Skype. Mr. Boodoosingh, welcome to the program. Okay.
Hi, good night, Wesley. This is Himas.
Okay, and we have Dr. Shellbillah from Atlantic on the line as well.
Hi, good night, Phillip.
Hello, Himas.
Great. Now, before you join the call, Dr. Shellbillah and I were having a conversation essentially about business continuity planning and what has kicked in now in response to the pandemic. What's over at NGC? What has been the situation?
Yeah, I think I listened to Philip's initial opening context, and I think it's pretty much the same across at the NGC. I think what I'll say, first of all, is maybe speak a bit about the national context, right? The planning at NGC isn't done in isolation. It's done with integration at the national level. So there does exist what is called a critical infrastructure facilities protection and response plan. And our plan has been developed in accordance and in sync with the requirements there. That plan actually speaks to, various scenarios, be it flooding, earthquakes, man-made disasters, that sort of thing. Within there, global pandemic, as Philip indicated, is one of those scenarios that we do plan for. It's unfortunate that we are responding in this particular way, but this is something that the energy sector have actually drilled for. It's not to the scale, and it's one of those things where you practice and you hope you never actually have to do it. But we do find ourselves in that situation right now. And like Atlantic, the NGC activated our response and continuity mechanisms very early on in the game, back in January, where we looked at what the requirements for global pandemic would be and looked at how that actually integrates with the rest of the country's plan and started coordinating both at the upstream and the downstream level to ensure continuity of the country's operation.
Now, what would be the top priorities?
I think, Philip, I don't know if he stole my language, but I think safe and reliable actually fits in very well with what our top priorities right now would be. And that includes providing the safety of our workers. Very early in the game, we took the decision to allow our employees, where possible, to work from home. We've made a blanket decision across the board for non-essential personnel. And the way I like to look at it is, guys that aren't wearing coveralls, non-essential in this context, to be able to work from home as well. And that kicked in, maybe about a week and a half ago. So we're actually protecting our employees, the vulnerable within our employee body as well. We're asked to work from home prior to that. And right now, where we are in this particular stage of the planning, and our plans have been developed using the World Health Organization guidelines and the different scenarios and escalation scenarios that they would have outlined. Our plans are in sync with that. So the stage that we are at now is just prior to community spread with local spread, and the level of our response is always one step ahead of that. So we are responding as though there is a community spread taking place, and we are ready to move to the other level if that is required.
Dr. Shellbillah, have you been able to move quickly into remote functionality for your key operatives?
Yes, we have. Essentially what we've done is, this is similar to him, those who work on the site, we have reduced the numbers to the bare minimum in order to minimize the impact and potential for spread on site. And then for those who are not site-based, who have to be on the plant, we almost over just a weekend, switched to remote working, something we hadn't done before. But our people were fantastic in being able to just deploy technology, including, opportunities like, bringing your own device and it being enabled to connect into the system so that you can do the basic things from home or remotely from wherever. It also enabled our teams to develop various apps that are assisting our people to be able to connect remotely and to do various things that, we haven't even done previous to this time. So yes, we are working quite effectively remotely.
Now, Mr. Boodoosingh, your customer base, if you could call it that, is different, is a different kind of customer base to what Atlantic would be talking about. You're talking about delivery of product, which would be natural gas, to a wide variety of customers. How have you been able to streamline your functions in such a way as to keep the consumers of your product supplied?
Yeah, thanks for that, Wesley. So I just want to step back a bit and talk about the way we manage those relationships, even outside of these types of scenarios. So there's several networks where the NGC is connected both at the upstream and at the downstream level. That involves several different touch points. There are touch points for HSE, there are touch points for security, there are touch points for operations, and those actually occur quite well. It's just the routine way of planning our business. Particularly at the HSE level, business continuity conversations occur all the time. We actually support each other both in the upstream and in the downstream, and we're always testing what our programs look like, particularly because we use a lot of common service providers, a lot of common contractors, and we want them to have similar experiences as they move through the organizations, both in the upstream and in the downstream. So those conversations are always sort of taking place. When we saw this particular novel coronavirus issue rear its head early in January, we actually started those conversations. So we've started those conversations with the upstream, all of our upstream suppliers, as well as the downstream, not only at the HSE level, but at the executive level as well. Phillip will tell you that he sits with my president on the Point Leases Executive Association, and those conversations have been occurring. Similar conversations are occurring at the CEO level on the upstream. So there's actually good coordination taking place outside and within this particular sort of scenario that we're dealing with. We also share quite a lot of each other's plans. We're constantly trading ideas in terms of how we're working, challenges that we're having, and how we're overcoming them together. And we're actually sharing that, which is a good practice across the industry. At the operational level where we are currently, those conversations take place almost daily. We're touching in almost on a daily basis with our upstream suppliers and our users, our customers, particularly the critical users, those public utility type customers that need to stay online to ensure that the nation's response to this pandemic is supported. Take something as simple as power, for instance. The ability for the healthcare system to function properly is built on the assumption that power is there, and power can only be there if we ensure critical supply of natural gas to them. So it's all connected, Wesley.
Yes, but in addition to the supply of power, which is absolutely critical, as you have said, and perhaps you can chime in on the reliability of the supply going forward. You have the petrochemical sector, you have light industry, and so on. They would have certain expectations regarding the level of supply. Are you seeing a situation in which you're able to continue providing a reliable supply?
Yeah, at this point in time, the reliability of the supply from the NGC's network is very high. We haven't had any upsets that is preventing, from a gathering, delivery, transportation standpoint, any issues that could result in that. What we've done ahead of this particular most recent restriction or guidelines provided, is we've actually looked at our forward planning and accelerated some of those critical maintenance activities that need to be performed, and actually started doing it a couple of weeks ago. So in the event that we have further restrictions, either because of quarantine issues or availability of our own staff, one of the planning scenarios for us at the NGC is looking at scenarios where we may only have 50% or less than 50% staff availability, and how will we respond in that sort of scenario. So while we had the opportunity, we actually did some of those critical maintenance activities to ensure that going forward we can ensure a sort of high level of reliability as supply to those critical customers that you mentioned, including the petrochemical as well as the light industrial users.
Now, Dr. Shellbillah, Mr. Boodoosingh spoke a lot about the collaboration with the domestic stakeholders. With respect to Atlantic, I presume there will be quite a few non-domestic, external and international stakeholders with which you will be having a lot of conversations. What are those conversations sounding like?
Well, I must start locally, actually. We are fully integrated into the Point Lisa community, as Himat mentioned earlier, and I think that's important because the local connection is extremely critical in this response. But indeed, we do also have broader connections. So we have been looking at how other LNG facilities might be dealing with sustaining their operations. And that includes how they would deal with, a worst-case scenario and trying to learn from that. We have been collaborating quite closely with our shareholders and looking at what they are doing, because whether it's NGC on the one hand or it's BP or Shell, these are multinational organizations, businesses across the globe, and are looking at how this is playing out in other countries as well. Countries where this has advanced to a worse state than where we are. And so we're trying to learn from them how these things are being managed over there and what we can learn from it as well. We have been working with our Chinese shareholders as well, and looking at opportunities where they can actually support us, and not only support us, but look at ways in which we together can also support our stakeholders. And so the collaboration is quite extensive, both locally and internationally.
Okay, so this is fueling the economy in the face of COVID-19. With us on the line is Mr. Himalaya Boodoosingh of the National Gas Company and CEO of Atlantic, Dr. Phillip Shellbillah. We're going to take a brief break and we'll be right back.